Morning, everyone. How are we doing at 8:30 in the morning after a nice big party last night?
Woo!
My name is Will Toomey. I'm the user experience evangelist for the Western region for Microsoft. I'm very happy to be with this august group of people on stage here. I'm going to run down the line, and then I'm going to ask each of you to give a brief introduction about yourself. So immediately to my right here is Dave Blakely, Jason Brush, Luke Warbluski, David Watson, and Jimmy Kim. And David, if you just start out by giving a brief overview of who you are, who you work for, we'll go on down the line.
Sure. I'm Dave Blakely. I am Director of Technology Strategy at IDEO, which is a professional service company that whose mission statement is to help its clients to innovate. And my role as Director of Technology Strategy is to help link underserved user needs and business opportunities with emerging technology.
I'm Jason Brush. I'm Executive Vice President for User Experience Design and Schematic. We're an interactive agency, and I oversee interaction design, information architecture, usability, and we work across really broad set of platforms ranging from the web to TV to mobile to new devices, environmental work, trying to improve the experiences that our clients, customers have with their clients via technology.
So I'm Luke Warbluski. I head up product ideation and design for Yahoo's front doors. So it's yahoo.com, my Yahoo, Yahoo Toolbar, range of other things. So the one thing I kind of raise about my background is I've been a web guy since day one. So started out at NCSA, did a bunch of consulting, worked at eBay, spent about 2.5 years at Yahoo. So anything I say comes from a very web designery context.
My name is David Watson, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a 10-year veteran of Disney ABC, which is something I never thought would be in the cards for me, since I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I sort of lead a group of entrepreneurs at Disney ABC Television that does innovative new products and oversees the experience from both the front-end user experience, and then we have engineers that work on fulfilling that experience. I sort of liken my job to being a stuntman, where our job is to try and fail, and by failing, we're learning where we can succeed and push the boundaries of common sense to come up with outstanding products. The main product that my team works on is the ABC full episode player that is on abc.com.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Kim. I have really two jobs. I'm head of Executive Vice President of Nexon Corp. We're the online gaming provider. We have like 300 million users across the world. I'm head of all of their web services and portal division. And Nexon also invested in a B2B company called Innovative, which has clients like BMW, Infinity, Nike Golf. And we design sales presentation platform for them. So those are my two jobs.
Wonderful. So we're all here today to talk about the business value of design and sort of how design can enable new value creation, and more than that, what the vocabulary is that can be used to talk about that value creation. So I think the first thing that I'd like to ask each of you to talk about is, what do you consider a design problem? What's that kind of problem space look like? And
I'll jump in with our first problem is not understanding the full scope of what it is that needs to be designed. Often, as is the case, they'll say, there's no way there'll be more than 4 shows in this thing, or we'll never put Disney Channel in this thing, or ESPN and ABC will never live side by side. And then, of course, once you launch it and the success of it is sort of seen, then, oh yeah, they start cramming in things. So the real challenge is convincing people to take the time to design up front for the unknown.
I think also, what's interesting there is that I think one of the things that I think about as a design problem is really managing people's expectations of what technology can do, right? So, can I watch TV on my PC, right? That was a really innovative thing, that happened with the ABC full episode player. And, managing perception is, I think, a really core design problem. I was just this morning last night when I ordered coffee, using the hang tag in my room, it said, okay, you can have it come between 7 and 7:30, 7:30 and 8. And in my experience of room service, I'm like, oh, it's not going to arrive promptly, so I'll have it arrive at between 7 and 7:30. And of course, I get I get the knock on the door exactly at 7 when I'm still in my bed. And, but managing that perception of like, when am I going to get my coffee? I mean, that's that type of perception with whether it's video or doing things on TV. Can I chat with my friends on TV, right? That sort of managing that perception and what that experience is going to be like is
So I would follow on that and say, when I think of what's a design problem, to go to your original question, I think it's anything where you can or you are trying to communicate to someone. And I guess that's how you manage the perception via communication. So whether you're trying to communicate interactivity in a digital product, whether you're trying to communicate strategy via something like a PowerPoint presentation, whether you're trying to communicate an event via a poster, something like that. Anytime there's communication, I might be biased in how I think about it because my background comes from graphic arts and interface design and things like that. But some people sort of generically apply design as a problem-solving solution for everything, right? Oh, I'll just design an organization, or I will design, you can put the word design in front of anything. So it can get very, very broad and almost muddled as to what the heck does it actually mean. So I try and, at least for the work that I do, pull it into anytime there's a place where we are trying to communicate something to somebody to either manage expectations, to explain interactions, whatever, then that kind of is something that should be utilizing some of the principles and some of the methodologies and the deliverables of design.
I think that's a good definition, Luke. And I think that when I think of design, I normally think of an innovation in some form of human experience, or more typically customer experience. Usually an innovation in the experience of a product or a service or digital media or an environment. The other thing I would say is that a design problem is one which lends itself to a holistic picture of technology, human, and business challenges, as opposed to an examination just along one of those dimensions.
So does that, just to push on that
Yeah.
for a second, does that mean that holistic picture only falls in the realm of designers, or can other areas really own that broader picture of that solution?
No,
Right?
absolutely
Could that
not.
come from an engineer?
Oh, I think there are any number of disciplines which benefit from a holistic approach. I would say that if you're taking a holistic approach to innovating, say, the user experience of a product or a service, then you're probably talking about a design problem. But absolutely, I think one of the challenges, especially in the United States, is for traditionally insular disciplines such as engineering, say, for example, software engineering, to become more holistic in the way they approach problems.
Well, I mean, I think related to that idea of integrating thinking about integrating engineering into solving design problems, one of the ways that I often try to think about it is that there's a material specificity, right, to these new technologies. There's certain things that can be done technically, right, and big design challenge is sort of pushing those technical capabilities to do things which engineers might not have thought of in the first place, right? So, we're always trying to think, well, the paradigms of web design and things being traditionally being flat because of the limitation of bandwidth and so forth, and the capabilities of HTML. Well, how can we push that aesthetic, or how can we push those experiences based on the advancing material specificity, and not be sort of stuck in traditional ways of thinking around design problems?
I think for us, when we do sales presentation platforms, you want it to look cool. My design problem is that it has to look good. It has to be presentable, but also functional. I mean, the thing is, when people think about design, people only think about graphical design. So our experience was that to make it look cool, the buttons have to be small. But when you use it, the buttons have to be kind of big, for a salesperson to access it anyway. So I think it really is trying to find a sweet spot between user experience and also graphical appearance. That's the main thing for our web services, and also for Enodo that we find. For our B2C users, they want to make it functional. It has to be familiar, so it can't be too funky. And it has to be, you want to get there, boom, boom, boom. And same as a sales presentation platform where salespeople, they want to access the information right away, but also they want to do it with pizzazz. So the real sweet spot is trying to find that beautiful, cool-looking effect, but also making it very functional. I think for web services and sales presentation platforms, that's the main design problem that we haggle over all the time.
And to play off that a little bit, and also what David said about designing for the technology. A little story about Walt Disney. When he started creating these audio animatronics, the first servo motors that he was working with were binary, so open, close, one movement. So that one of the first things he designed was the tiki room and the mechanical birds, because those are things that, do like this and like this. And then, because that's what you could do with those motors. The second thing was they discovered that as they pushed the technology, they could get the human sort of figures to stand, but they sort of, the motors are, they're big motors and they're heavy, and they would sort of wobble. So the thing is, well, let's make it a pirate, because that's kind of a drunken swagger. And so they sort of designed for what the technology was capable of while continuously pushing the technology to the next new thing.
I think that's a really important point. It's one of the fears I have when we talk about, the business value of design and things like that is that we sometimes begin to speak in a vacuum. And like we only talk about design, my team at Yahoo, the product ideation part of it is a small team of about 4 developers. And I think the best things we create are when we get those developers in with a great designer and they're working very collaborative and iterative. That shouldn't be an aha moment for anybody. But I also have a team of 12 designers. And if all I had was that team of 12 designers, well, we wouldn't be doing ding dong, right? We'd be making lots of pretty mock-ups and layering the walls with images. So the functional definitely needs to be there. When you kind of raise the question of how do you frame a design problem or what is a design problem, I always go back to, I don't know if you guys have seen Jess McMullen's sort of framework of design. So he says one form of thinking about design is purely styling. Then the next level up is, okay, now you're thinking about how you can actually design the functionality. Moving even further, then you can start thinking about design as a problem-solving methodology. And if you even take it up another step, then you can really start thinking about it as a problem-framing methodology, which is one of the things you started talking about at the very beginning. And the same underlying principles, the same methodologies can be applied at each of those successive levels, depending on where you are in your, organizational awareness of how those methodologies and principles can apply at each of those levels. You either spend all your time pushing pixels and making colors, or you actually care about the usability of the interaction design, or you're involved in trying to figure out how to solve bigger problems. That's the classic case of, don't tell me we need a bridge, tell me there's a canyon, and then we'll try and solve it. Or you're actually up even higher, like, trying to reframe the canyon as well. Maybe this should really be a tourist park instead of getting people across it, right?
So trying to put a little bit of a box around this. I mean, each of us here are either practitioners or customers of design projects. And how do we talk about the business value of design to the people that don't already get it? And this is really the problem space that's really interesting to me. Every design conference I've ever been to has always approached this question of, oh, well, of course design creates great business value, as if it was, just kind of obvious. And at least for us, and I would assume that it is. But how do we then communicate that to people that don't get it? So I'm interested in understanding what some of the vocabulary is that you use to describe design, the value of design to non-practitioners.
For me, we have this methodology called ACE. It's called Analyze, Construct, and Evaluate. And the key thing, you have the metrics. I mean, it's not about does it look cool and everything else. That when you start the project, we analyze the stakeholders, the focus groups. Say what do you want to achieve? What's the ideal situation? What are the metrics by numbers? So and then you construct it, do rapid construction of the prototype, and then you evaluate, and then it goes iterative process again. The thing is that you have, for us, if on the web service it's KPI, like DT, UV, DT. On the sales process is how much the salespeople like it, and if it's going to be expanded to other stores. So the key thing we talk about when we start the project is what are the metrics that you're looking at? What is the purpose of it? And I think once you explain it that way, then they realize, okay, if the web DT goes up or UV goes up, it's a success.
So you define that criteria up front at the beginning
exactly.
of the design project?
You have to be very clear, or I think that a lot of people are like, what the heck is, usually a CEO, I like it. And that's metrics, right? But that's always the wrong way, because then again, in 2 years, that website's going to be gone, that service is going to be gone. Mm-hmm. So the key thing is you have to define the metrics and the purpose first, and then, you won't have a situation where at the end of the project, like, oh, I don't like it. I think that's very, very, very key in our experience.
I think that metrics, I agree, Jimmy, that metrics are the right place to start. I think that our approach at IDEO is to begin by stating that no matter what we do, whether and I would say no matter what you folks do, whether it's whether you're bringing in a consultant for innovation or whether you've got a program happening internally, I think the important place to start is to understand that you want to have impact and to ask yourself, okay, I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that you want whatever your endeavor is to have a certain level of impact. Exactly how are we going to quantify that impact? Exactly what metrics are we going to use? And I think the area where we fall down, where we have fallen down in the past, frankly, is about 80% of our work is with the private sector. And so the obvious metric there is improved revenue and increased retained earnings. But I think it's very important to understand that you don't necessarily want to limit the metric to just that. That may be the single most important and measurable result of an innovation program, but other possible metrics, such as brand extension or brand reinforcement, or even business process changes, such as a program that develops new tools within your organization to reduce the amount of time before a prototype can be fielded to your market. Those could potentially be very important metrics. So I agree with Jimmy that we want impact. If we're going to have impact, we've got to have metrics. Typically, those are business metrics, but I would encourage everybody to look extremely broadly at a variety of metrics and to define those from the very, very outset. Otherwise, you have no gauging whether you've done well or done poorly.
So one of the challenges that we encounter as consultants coming into projects is usually we're brought in by a particular product group within a larger organization to solve a problem, right? And it's either to sort of invent a product, or it's to execute or innovate on a concept that's already been developed internally. But usually, one of the challenge, and they have their own metrics, right? I mean, that group has its own metrics. One of the challenges that we see working with large organizations that are beginning to adopt a real diverse set of technology to create products and services for their customers, right? We work with T-Mobile, Comcast, and Time Warner, right? Lots of different channels, lots of different groups within those organizations, each with their own sort of metrics for success. And one of the things that we commonly see is that there is, when you think about consistency in, you could call it design, right, or customer experience, but across the products being created between all of those groups, there's often a real inconsistency. And that sort of inconsistency is a very difficult thing to quantify the effect of, right? Because you can say, all right, if we have, inconsistency between the address book experience on the PC versus the TV, right? What are the metrics that you can use to sort of to create a project out of that, to say, oh, we need to make these things consistent. And usually the people in those organizations who might be able to sort of look at those problems are concerned with other things, right? So it's that's something that we experienced. And last night I was talking to somebody, and he had a great example of using a Blu-ray player, right? And he sits down, sticks in his Blu-ray disc, the player spins up. That takes a few minutes. Then you get the welcome to Blu-ray video, right? That takes some more time. Then you get a bunch of trailers that you can't skip, right? Some more time. Then you get the FBI rating. Some more time. And by from the time from like inserting the turning on the player, having the player sort of come to life, inserting the disc, to actually watching the movie that you were sitting down to watch, right? You're talking maybe 15 minutes, right? But the thing is, each one of the people responsible for designing those individual pieces, probably like, oh, how long is it going to take for the player to boot? Oh, well, this is an acceptable amount of time, right? How long is it going to, the trailers? Oh, people love trailers, right? So people are concerned about that, and nobody's looking at the broader perspective, and that's more challenging.
To tie that back to the metrics discussion, which I think is really important, a person much smarter than me once told me, you are what you measure. And I think that's really true, especially in regards to things like this. If everybody's sort of being measured on their individual success metrics, the trailer team, how many trailers have you embedded in there? The startup team, the legal team, all these guys sort of have their own accountability and their own metrics. That's what becomes the driver for the experience that pops out. I think in a lot of cases there aren't user experience metrics in place that take a look at the holistic picture you were talking about, that take a look at really the broader impact on people. And the value that the design can really bring to the table when you start to go back to your original question again, when you start talking about how you can talk about the value of design to people, is by introducing different ways of quantifying how people are experiencing your products and what they're actually getting out of them, and does it even matter to them, or what do they care about. So in your particular case with the Blu-ray player, well, maybe somebody should actually insert a metric that's like time till somebody starts enjoying a movie, or instant gratification on movie. That would be something that kind of becomes a higher level framing metric, and it gets rid of that stuff.
Individual teams can then respond to in their own in solving their own design problems, right? Yeah.
I think so.
So what about in the case when you, so in particular when you end up working in a large organization, you oftentimes run into business groups that have, for example, conflicting metrics. So you might have a direct sales organization. You also might have an organization that is interested in a reseller channel or something like that. Have you all run into situations like that? And more than that, what are the strategies that you've used to try to either come up with that sort of set of metrics that works, or come up with that design solution that allows you to mitigate those challenges?
Escalation. No, I'm just kidding. There's a guy named Fred Kaufman who wrote a book called Conscious Business. And in there he has a great example about building a car. And in there he talks about, there's a certain team tasked with fuel efficiency. And to get ultimate fuel efficiency, your car should weigh absolutely nothing. It might as well be like a motorcycle. Then there's another group that's really chartered with safety, also really important. But to get to massive safety, you're going to end up with a tank. So is it a tank or is it a motorcycle? Well, it's neither, right? Mm-hmm. But thankfully, in the organizational structure, there's an engineering manager that has the safety engineer and the fuel efficiency engineer reporting up to them, and they're responsible for a little bit of the more holistic picture and rationalizing those things. So I think there's actually a healthy tension between conflicting metrics. I think when you get that abrasion, that's where sparks happen, and that's where interesting things emerge. And when you have that tension, there just needs to be an arbitration, and as I was speaking before, something above that says, well, actually somebody needs to say, hey, we're actually building a car. Otherwise, you get a tank or you get a motorcycle.
Well, and I think the area in which we see that tension playing out most often these days is the tension between advertising and content editorial, right? Mm-hmm. That people coming to people turning on their TV to watch TV, or coming to a website to get content, and the tension there between that and the ad sales team, who would like nothing but advertising kind of crammed into every corner.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's the problem I think that all TV networks have right now with putting more and more video online is how many ads do you put on there before it becomes a duplication of the TV experience, right? Which is something we're trying to improve upon, as we're always doing. And it is a tough challenge. I mean, I was kind of laughing when you asked the question, because it's very real, and you can't just always rely on, as much as you want to put on your sort of idealistic hat and say it's the customer experience. You got to pay for it at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so there's a constant challenge and there's multiple different forces on it. It's the finance people want to put more ads into it to pay for it. The user wants no ads. And then there's the reality of designing for what the ad agencies can provide. So, one of my old bosses once said, "Look, if I had my way, I'd have everyone working here for free, working 80 hours a week. The employee would rather work 1 hour a week and get paid a lot of money." So it's just a negotiation between there. So I think it really comes down to a negotiation of what's the best interests for all parties.
And the brilliant thing about television, right, as a medium, is that early on it developed a healthy relationship between those two different competing interests of people wanting great content and networks wanting to make money from advertising revenue. And what that evolved to was a format which the content creators used to their advantage, right? So you have ad breaks in a sitcom or hour-long dramatic series, and those ad breaks create the dramatic beats for the content itself, right? So the advertising model and the form that the creative, that the screenwriters and the showrunners are using to create the content are sort of intertwined in a really integrated way, in which I don't think we've yet seen.
The unfortunate part of that is you get so wrapped up in your own thinking that it becomes a snowball rolling downhill.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. Will's comment really struck a chord with me, because I deal every day with as a consultant, with very senior people in organizations who are entirely and understandably wrapped up in their own thinking, because you get what you measure for, right? So exactly how do I arbitrate? What is my method for arbitration between, for example, a manufacturing manager who says that realistically a mobile device is going to be as big as a construction brick if it has the battery life that the marketing manager would like it to have? And obviously it's an extremely difficult question, but the single best arbiter I have found is to get everyone involved some direct experience with end user experience and a certain level of honest appreciation and empathy for candidate end users. Okay? You get this variety of people out into the field interviewing people who are consuming your content or using your mobile device or engaging in your service or whatever it is, and in aggregate they get a certain immediate, and odd as it sounds, sort of heartfelt appreciation or empathy for the actual end user experience. And I would submit that rather than a consultant or or an aggressive manager, a group of end users who you come into direct contact with, not through market research but through direct contact, is the single best arbiter of these sorts of almost intractable disagreements that we all run into every day.
It's shocking to me how many people build things, design things, and market things that they never use.
Would never use them and are completely unable to put themselves into the shoes of the potential end users, or worse yet, design those things for themselves, even though they know intellectually that they represent a tiny, tiny fraction of the target market.
Yep. I totally agree with that. I think that in the end, you have to really pick and choose. I mean, I always tell people that you can't have everything, right? In the phone, you want everything. But I think that the form factor, it really is give and take, and the organization has to really pick and choose. I mean, it's not about my team wanting to put this in, we have to do this and that. A lot of times when you're looking at the small picture, people are fighting for it. But I think we sit down with the people and say, what's the most important thing? And everybody, when you kind of step back and say, yes, this is the most important thing, then they're willing to give and take. But I think that you have to have that kind of give and take mindset and really realizing, yes, like Nexon.com, we have so much traffic. A lot of people say that we should put so much flash in, make it a rich experience. And then on the other side, network bandwidth is going to kill us. Do you know what I'm saying? So we fight about this. So what's the most important experience? And we said, we want people to get to our games as fast as possible. If that's the case, okay, only flash banner ads. It doesn't look that cool, but let's make it for fastest. I think the user experience that you said, that you have to really think about it. Your identity has to be very clear. I mean, because if your identity is not clear and your user experience is not clear, you're going to really run into a problem where you're going to try to put in everything, and your site really becomes nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Steve Jobs and the decisions he makes. Yep. He really is a master at blending the business decision with the consumer experience, with the manufacturing, realities of how you can make something, and that's. I think I'm allowed to say his name in here, but
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because so much of the user-centric design process is that moment where you go out and you're in the field and there's that moment of understanding. It's this kind of visceral, sort of almost intuitive understanding of what's going on, and you can see it in your stakeholders' faces when all of a sudden they get it as well. But Steve Jobs is the absolute opposite, right? It's his singular vision, and if you don't like it, well, there's the door.
that's right.
Well, but they boarded up the usability. I mean, to your point, Apple does not go out and talk to consumers. They took their places where they got feedback in terms of usability, boarded them up, turned them into storage closets.
And they're doing wonderfully, and people admire them. But I submit that they are not a broad-scale recipe for success that is easily duplicated by other organizations.
But
I submit that it is through user empathy that in general you get the most sustainable recipe for success.
So I would go even a little bit further and throw out the quintessential design answer of it depends, right?
Yeah, there you go.
I think there's situations where there's a singular vision and go for it. Sometimes that singular vision is way wrong and you end up tanking.
Sure.
Sometimes getting out in the field talking to consumers is the exact right thing to do. Sometimes it actually derails people because they don't know how to process that feedback. They don't, and they don't know how to internalize it and what to do with it. Because I know many organizations that have follow me home programs or ethnographic research programs. They come back out of it, they come out with a giant PowerPoint deck. That PowerPoint deck sits on 5 people's desks. Nothing ever happens with it. They don't know at all what to do with it. So that's not really necessarily a recipe for success either. Whereas the example I always pull out is Intuit. Intuit had a product called Quicken originally, which was a personal finance application. 3 years in a row, they ran a survey, found people were using it for business use. They dismissed the data. They're like, this is a personal finance product. Third year, they actually went into the field and saw how people were using the stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, people are actually using it in this way. They launched QuickBooks, which at the time I got the data, 95% of their revenue was from QuickBooks now, because they saw what people are doing. They understood how they were trying to do accounting for small business, and they built a product around that, and it became huge. So there's a perfect example of using that field research to drive huge innovation. But in other cases, it's literally a PowerPoint deck sitting on somebody's desk.
Well, I think my point with Steve Jobs, and I think you've just also proved it, is that it takes, you can have all the user data in the world or no user data. It takes a strong leader and a good sort of arbiter and convincer to be able to drive a vision forward. So that was an example where Quicken didn't have a strong enough, you got to put your balls on the table and say, this is we're going to do this. Yep. And I would bet that Steve Jobs is talking to people, whether or not it's the consumer. He's got a lot of employees. Right. He knows how he uses his products. So he's talking to people. But the thing is, he's a strong enough leader, and I don't want to, I don't put him on a pedestal like a lot of people. This isn't Macworld, but it just whatever the leaders. Bob Iger, in its heyday, Michael Eisner, 15 years ago. But it is taking someone, and sometimes is the designer. Now, the designer in traditional large organization has been pushed down in favor of the finance people. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a rise, as Jack Welch sort of did with the base of power in a company, where they're getting a little more credibility.
So pivoting the conversation just a little bit, there was that great article or that great issue of Fast Company in October, I believe, that they had the designer on the cover, and they started talking about, among other things, the difference between the basket of quote-unquote design stocks that they looked at versus the average market. And over 10 years, design stocks had increased in valuation by 10 times versus the rest of the market. So what I'd like to see if we can focus the next portion of the conversation on is thinking about some hard business metrics, things like margin, things like premium pricing, things like time to market. Are you seeing examples in this? And was this more of an example of you sort of were working with an enlightened manager and got them to take a risk the first time and it got easier the next time? Or how does that work? How does that sort of whole process work?
I think you have to empathize with the people with those metrics. Too often, designers sort of sit in their ivory tower and like, this would be the ideal experience, or I have my singular creative vision, and they don't understand the harsh realities that the people that actually have the responsibility for the product are in. And so, doing a little bit of quote unquote field work with them to understand what they're going through and understand their empathy, and then bringing that into how you're thinking about the product and talking about it when you talk about the design. So it's not just, I really think blue is the right thing because it's, got this transformative Zen thing. No, here's how this is going to actually impact the metrics you care about. Here's how this is going to help us achieve the business goals that your neck is literally on the line for, and let's work together.
So one of the things that challenge that we often face is that we're not just designing products that go out immediately into the field, right? We do a lot of prototyping work and sort of internal work inside of companies, and when you talk about, I think you're exactly right about empathizing with the stakeholders and the clients is just so. I mean, as a consultant, is so important because, often we're working for a senior person in the company who has a vision for something, who needs to then take that vision and explain it to his or her peers, and in a way that makes sense, and sort of so that they have these metrics or they have a hypothesis about how this is going to reduce churn, or how this is going to open up new markets, or how this is going to create new relationships with other with other industries, or whatever the business driver is. They need to be given the tools and the language to sort of to describe and translate and explain how design helps those goals. And your point, Luke, about designer not sitting in an ivory tower and saying, oh, here's this beautiful thing. It's like, and really, whenever you design, also considering the context and explanation for what you're doing, right? And so often, speaking very tactically for a second, we will do wireframes and design comps and animations, And if you give those to somebody, just sort of like, here are your designs, and you don't sort of tell a story with them or put them in a larger framework, the value of those things vis-a-vis those metrics gets completely lost. And no matter how good the idea is, it's going to get squashed, right? Or ignored. So that's,
I think one thing that we do is when we define products is really determining what's nice to have and what's need to have. I mean, that's another way of metrics. I mean, in the sense that if it's just nice to have, when you do a product, this looks cool, it's nice and everything, but is it really need to have? I mean, the core thing is when we design a sales presentation platform, we said that salespeople, they're always swamped so much by all these brochures and all these things all together. If you give them another system, they're like, what? I have to learn another system again? But when you say to them, this is going to be, when you convince them, when we show them the potentials, that's why we do rapid prototyping, like we said. After you analyze the stake, you quickly show, you have to visualize. We live in a visual world, so you have to quickly show them, this is what's going to be. Why don't you evaluate it, and then we'll go all over again. I think the key thing is, if you want a design project to go forward, is you have to have the ability to rapidly prototype, to show what you can do. And once you can do it, they'll say, I hate it. Let's not do it. And they say, oh, hey, this has some potential. This is my input here. So I think one of the key things is once you define the metrics, the next thing is you have to quickly, rapidly prototype. And then, it's a hateful thing, but put yourself on the wire and be evaluated. And sometimes they'll say, you go through this is what you wanted, right? And they'll say no.
Right.
And it's very embarrassing, right? We're supposed to be we're supposed to be the user experience, but they say no. But once you have the nice to have, need to have factors, okay, let me rapidly prototype again. If that cycle is fast enough, the project will be alive. But if the rapid prototyping side takes too long, people lose interest and also mind share and everything else. So it becomes such a nice to have project. That's what we try to do all the time. So define, construct, evaluate, do it all over again.
Yeah, I think what the activities that you're describing, Jimmy, lead to point of view. And I submit that the first step in addressing Will's question is, if you are engaging in a program or you've brought in an external design consultant or you've got some innovation initiative and you don't have point of view, you have people doing what Jason described, where people sort of dispassionately say, well, here's option A, here's option B, here's option C, what should we do? You failed.
Yep.
That's old school design that fails and doesn't work. And it's terrible that there still exists dispassionate, opinionless, old school designers who think that just by floating or surfacing clever options of any sort, whether it's pixels on a screen or physical product design or several new business processes, they can consider that design. It is not design. Point of view is absolutely essential to good design, and these days, point of view is often born of business acumen and an understanding of business metrics. That's where design is today, and it's only going to get more and more, point of view will only get more and more fundamental to good design as we go on.
That's a great point. The three sort of core values that I put into my group are be flexible, don't get too wrapped up in your own ideas, but be remarkable, doing something that is, by definition, someone will remark on, and be brave, really, because once you create a successful thing, it becomes harder to be brave.
Yeah.
It becomes comfortable. But one thing, again, Ann Sweeney and Bob Iger have always said is we want game changers. Trying to make a $30 million business a $40 million business doesn't cut it for us because we might as well pack up and go home in the shadow of a multi-billion dollar business. It is making a $30 million business into a $300 million business. What are you going to do? What are your and you really, I think you really put it well.
How are you going to do any of those things without point of view? How are you going to be brave? How are you going to be remarkable if you don't have a point of view about what the market needs and you don't have some provocative opinions about where you should be going?
Right.
You're never going to get there.
Yep.
Yeah, so let me build on that just 1 second. So one issue, I think, is when you talk about the value of design or when you try and bring designs to clients, is saying, here's 5 options, pick and choose, and they're like, well, what the hell do I have you here for in the first place? Should you be telling me which one of these things I do? And then it reduces the conversation to, well, I think I like orange, right?
Right.
So it's sort of a waste of everybody's time. But the other thing that I see, when people try and sell the value of design, they go out and they create a road show, and they're like, here's how we work on wireframes, and wireframes are really exciting, and and here's like a user story, and here's how we write a user story, and then we might make a flow diagram. Look at the flow diagram.
Aren't we clever?
And everybody's like, I don't give a crap. It's like Tom G makes this great point. It's like the finance department going around and being, look at how we do balance sheets. Check this out.
Awesome.
This is a depreciation worksheet. Depreciation worksheet. Come on. All people want from the finances department is like, how much money do I have to do what I want to do? What's my budget look like? That's how you guys are creating value for me. You're helping me manage. I don't need to know about your depreciation worksheets or your balance sheets or whatever the heck. Same with design, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Focus on the outcomes and have a point of view around it. Don't sit there and preach your methodology and try and assume people are going to jump on board. They don't care.
Well, one of the mistakes that I see people making all the time is focusing on the documentation as the product, right? Because when you get into a design process, you're like, okay, I have this deck, which is a brief, which is supposed to explain the problem and is necessary. You have to write some stuff down in order to start thinking, but people end up like futzing with these PowerPoint decks and these deliverables that in and of themselves have no, like, they're not the product. You're not, it's like you have to start designing, and I've often seen a lot of sort of fear inside of large organizations of people who are sort of mid-level manager, product managers who are like, well, this is my document and this is what I, it's like I hired this consultant and I'm going to pay them, and I've paid them $500,000 to do this thing, and when it's some simple little design at the end, they're like, and somebody comes to them and say, well, how do you spend your money? If they can point to this like document, this interim document, they're like, look, we have this thing. It's like it's self-preservation for those people, and how to sort of help. One of the challenges we have is to learn how to help those folks, see past these interim documents to the final design solution. It's really challenging.
So a really interesting thing has happened on this panel, and it's sort of this recognition that, one, business people get caught up in their own thinking and kind of get very focused on the metrics that they're measured on. And this side-by-side recognition that design professionals tend to get very focused on their own process and don't tend to apply the skills that we all talk about as being important for a user-centric design process to their own work context. And I think that the really interesting thing is the fact that you all have called out in one way or another that really successful business value creation comes from that internal recognition that I need to translate my design vocabulary into your business metrics and come up with that strong correlation to go ahead and figure out how we solve this problem together, as opposed to, no, this is absolutely right for the user need. No, that will totally destroy our monetization. And you're still never sort of speaking the same language. And I think that that seems like that's a vocabulary and conceptual shift that has yet to be broadly understood in the marketplace yet. Mm-hmm. So, speaking a little bit to just the people that are on the customer side, I'm wondering sort of how design, if you can categorize it, how design is thought of broadly within your organization. How is it valued? Is it seen as strategic? Like what's the attitude towards design?
I think design is the most important thing because we live in a visual world now, and if you're not able to show what you're thinking right away, I think, like I said, it's just a PowerPoint slide. I think design to us is really the encapsulation of your technology and also your know-how and also your design prowess. I think these three things are, so when Innovative, we made the tool, we first had this envision that, look, we have this tool, let's give it to the people. But we didn't sell one copy until we decided, let's get some designers in. And let's show them what we can do. And once you show them what you can do, they're like, now they say, okay, I want to buy one. Mm-hmm. Train me. So I think for us, Innovative was a turning point when we had the software. We thought that people were going to use it, but they're using Adobe Photoshop, Blend, Expression. They have too many tools to learn. But when you show them what you can do, what you can visualize, I mean, the turning point was that when we have now 12, 13 designers, and these guys are now consultants. They go to the clients, and when they show them, this thing is like, okay, I don't want to pay you $500,000 anymore. I want to do this by myself. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, the design aspect is the most important because it really shows the power of how far you can go. So I think for Nexon also, we have a user experience team that Daniel, which Dave knows, that we just focus on, in the sense that these people, like I said, you have to be able to show just not these like block web diagrams of really showing it. So design in a sense that when you have a nice PowerPoint presentation, that makes a world of difference. We all know that. That's why sometimes, we make great efforts in beautifying it, right? So the thing is right now, in both organizations, I think, design is the encapsulation of just not trying to show something. It's really showing, it's the encapsulation, like I said, of technology, know-how, and also your graphical interface prowess. So those are the turning points for our two companies that I experienced.
Yeah, and I think to build on that a little bit, we really fortunate in Disney to be coming from a design sort of history, but design is part of the equation. We really look at ourselves as an experience company, and the experience for the user is design, story, business acumen, all these different layers that add into the full experience. Otherwise, you become a commodity. You become a Magic Mountain or something where you're just putting rides up, or you're just becoming a Warner Brothers where you have shows. Again, good shows, but there's no the Warner Brothers experience. Disney is one of the few studios that is, you've got the experience of going to a Disney movie, and that people will actually call out. No one says, really, I'm going to go see a Universal movie. So it creates and there's an expectation already that we're working for the trust of the Disney or ABC brand, or for the most part the Disney brand of quality experience, and design becomes a factor in that. But you'll always have, I think, behind the scenes as you lead up to what the final experience is, you're always going to have I believe a healthy push and pull between the design process and the development process. And the development process includes everything from the how it's going to get done to what the metrics are. And I think that's a healthy give and take.
So I'll raise a little bit of a counterpoint. Living in Silicon Valley, I encounter lots of people, lots of firms, and lots of ideas. And I actually have seen an over-proliferation of the 5 Ws, user experience, usability, and user. So what I mean by that is everybody that I go and talk to pays a lot of lip service to user experience, but they don't really know. They're like, yeah, we have to have we think user experience is key to our strategy. Well, then why are you doing these 7 things? Or why are you doing these 10 things? That's exactly counter to that statement you just made. And they're just saying this because it's like the flavor du jour. And I think this has happened in like 2006, 2007-ish, where everybody's like user. I personally tried to remove the word user from my vocabulary and tried to talk about people and try to get as granular as possible when we describe the people.
Viewers, whatever. Yeah, being more specific about it.
I'll still use it as a user interface element. If I'm talking about user interface, like user activated, right? When it's actually in the product. But when I talk about the people using it, I'm trying to get away from that vocabulary because, and maybe this is just my isolated pocket of, Bay Area, everybody's making a tech company on the web, what have you. But they all say, user experience is so important to us. We that's number one. And none of them do it. I mean, none of them take the action steps that really back that up. So it's almost the converse, right? It's not that they don't have a design vocabulary. It's that they're taking these design vocabulary terms and they're just turning them into without no substance, right?
Can I share a quote on that?
Yeah.
Andy Grove, the former Intel chairman, is one of my heroes, and something he said recently, which really shocked the innovation industry, was he said, "The word innovation has become overused, cliche, and meaningless." Yeah. And then he went on to say, this is a quote, "I despise the mechanism that spits out these fads because they are much easier to talk about than to do." I think that's...
No, I think that's right on. Yeah.
Well, there's that phrase, innovation is the new black, or user experience is the new black. And
Black was the new black.
Yeah, well, that too. Or brown, depending on who you're talking to. Kind of taking the original question from the flip side, I'm wondering if you all, as consultants, are hearing your customers or potential customers talk about design in a different way. Ask for different types of projects and saying, oh, we want a strategic design project.
What they're talking about in a new way is innovation, and then design is an essential piece of that innovation. I would say that what's changed, at least in my experience, is not so much the profile of design in industry and in academia and so on. It's the profile of innovation. Everyone now, every CEO everywhere has got an innovation agenda that they can state pretty clearly, and design is regarded as a pretty important element within an innovation initiative. And the definition of design has broadened out a bit beyond just, say, interaction design or industrial design, broadened to include, an examination of the complete customer experience or stakeholder experience in the case of B2B companies.
I'm still hearing the user, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's we, and it's. I find it. Similarly, I find it very frustrating in that, people are, kind of it's chanting this mantra without really understanding without sort of understanding why that term became sort of popular or faddish to begin with, right? What's fascinating is that they use, everybody uses the iPhone as this it's, repeatedly, no matter what no matter what we're designing, it's like something like the iPhone, and without also understanding what makes the iPhone special, for that particular, for the particular audience and group of people who, the iPhone is a great product for, right? There's I think a big part of our goal is to sort of take that impulse, which I think is healthy, right? Which is saying, we want a great experience. We want our customers to enjoy our products. We want our customers to we want our product to be beautiful, right? That sort of, that impulse, and then trying to reframe it, do some education, kind of focus it in a little more specific way rather than this general, something like the iPhone.
Yeah, I actually love the iPhone example because the iPhone was a bulldozer through Apple. I mean, it literally left like blood in the streets when it was made. And that's, I agree.
OS 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. OS 10. I mean, Leopard launched with significantly less than it should have because of. So anyhow, the purpose, the point of that is, I mean, yes, there's the context of who's the iPhone for, and it works in a particular area. But the other thing, there's blood, sweat, and tears behind that thing, right? And so when you say user experience is the most important thing, but we don't really want to pay for it. And by I mean time, resource, commitment, all that stuff.
And risk.
And risk. I mean, there's a lot of risk.
Huge risk.
That's right. So these companies and these organizations say, hey, user experience is the most important thing to us, but, we really got to launch fast, so. Or, but, we can't really change this architecture thing, so we're going to have people register twice. Because, you can't ask us to go back and change the infrastructure. Come on, it's going to take forever.
The idea of the carnage that the iPhone left inside of Apple, knowing people who worked on it and, who, of course, while they were working on it, couldn't say anything. But they were, it's like, didn't see them for a year. And after they got out, they were just completely burnt out. And it's like, okay, you're going to make something, this sort of, you're talking about being brave, right? It's like the bravery and leadership that it takes to do something that different. People say they want something like that, but are they really willing to commit to it? Are they willing to spend the money? And then, and we also have the problem of, okay, well, we want your, as a consultant, customers come to us and they're like, okay, we have this great idea. We want to launch it in 6 months. And we want your best team and we want to start tomorrow, right? Which is wonderful, but it's really hard, and it's like, are you willing to what are you willing to do for that? It's really it's challenging.
I think the good saying, you put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. I think for every organization, if they say, I argue with my CFO in the sense that, we're going to make this good, we need a user group, we need a focus group, we need to get their feedback, and those are expensive. Let's be honest now. Getting those things is not a cheap affair because you really have to think of the metrics. You really have to think about. You have to get them in. You have to sample and everything else. And a lot of people say the same thing. No. You're the experts. So you should be able to do this by yourself. But in the sense that sometimes you have to have the guts as a designer or as a firm to say no. Because a lot of times the business thing that you got to land the deal. Let's just do it. Let's see what happens. But if you go down that path, I guarantee that you're never going to see business again. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you have to say, you really have to convince them. Like, I wish I could look good in a Hugo Boss, but Hugo Boss is very slender and everything else. I love Hugo Boss, but I can't wear it. So my wife tells me, you can't wear Hugo Boss, So she has the guts to tell me, you can't wear it because you look terrible in it. But sometimes I want an iPhone, but no. If that's not right. and let me show you why it's not right, But these people are so fixated saying that, I want this. I'm like, no, look, you're going to look terrible. Users are going to hate it. So sometimes it's very, very so-called altruistic, but you guys have, sometimes for us, we have to say, look, let me show you. Let's get some feedback. It's going to cost you some money, but trust us. It's going to save you at least $1 million of pain of putting it back together. And I think that, so do you really want it? Do you really want to see if you look, let me get a mirror, to see how, I think you have to put your money where your mouth is. A lot of people see cool stuff, think, I want that, but it has nothing to do with your business. It has nothing to do with your site. And sometimes designers, they want to, businesses, they want to get the deal for any reason. They say, sure, we'll do it.
Yeah. That's a great point, to get a mirror, I think, and I think that echoes something you said earlier, which is the rapid prototyping.
Yeah.
The rapid prototyping is the ultimate mirror.
Yeah.
Is, hey, you know what, you want to see it, here's what it looks like this way, and you can do that, but it all takes money and time.
Exactly.
So I guess the bottom line is, or across this is, when you talk about the business value design, anytime you want value, you got to put in a cost. Right? There's a cost to get that value out. So yes, there's definitely a value in design, but it doesn't come without cost. Too few people want the value but don't want to put in the cost.
Yeah. So we're starting to get towards the end of the panel, and I want to sort of close on the final questions before we open it up to questions from the group here. So if we accept that design and user experience and potentially innovation, although let's maybe not go quite that far, has become sort of this overused kind of catchphrase. What's next? What's going to happen in the market next? What's sort of the next thing that businesses need to start thinking about? Is this just the internalization and people stop talking about it? Is it start thinking about a new way of approaching this? What's sort of the future? What are we going to be talking about 24 or 36 months from now?
I think it's going to circle back around to functionality, because you've seen a lot of, at least in our industry, you've seen a lot of the theatrics of getting people to, again, getting very specific, of watching a full-length primetime television show. And we certainly don't claim credit being the first to do that. MTV and a number of other cable networks did that first. But getting people convinced that it's a nice experience to watch a show online was important. In the future, we're going to start moving past that, and they're like, I just want it to work well. I want my TV to not take 5 minutes to warm up. So that was the example of the TV moving towards functionality. I want my phone to not have to connect or get interference from my microwave or whatever. So the form becomes, I think, the first, which is where we're sort of seeing it now. The next will be make it work really well.
Yeah, I think corollary to that is the idea of, so if there are new infrastructures in place to transport data between platforms, right, so that you can get your watch list from your on-demand DVR, that you could get it on your PC, right? That there's data which is being transferred between platforms there. Right now it feels like we're very focused on just the infrastructure for that and not scaling the experience from platform to platform. And so I think being more specific about the features and affordances and functionality that we have on platform to platform, rather than just saying, oh, convergence, it's going to be everything everywhere, right? I think that's a bit of a panacea and a kind of not very helpful to users. And then the other thing, that's a sort of broader perspective, but I think one of the things that I would love to see in a couple of years is more. David's group is really interesting in ABC. Speak for your group. Is that you have really talented, smart, design-oriented people inside, right? And there's nothing that, as a consultant, we like more than working with customers who have smart, design-oriented people inside, because we speak the same language. They understand the value that we bring as outside consultants. It's a wonderful thing. So I would love to see, personally, more smart designers inside of companies rather than just dealing with product managers. Hopefully that'll be an evolution in business.
You wondering what's going to happen in a 24 to 36 month time frame? Music's over with the economy. We are certainly in a significant slowdown, if not a recession. We're going to see the same thing that happens with any other business where there's oversupply. We're going to see a shakeout of design tools and design methods, and we're going to see people take a much sharper pencil to evaluating which design tools and which design methods actually work and are demonstrably successful. We're going to see fewer buzzwords, fewer fads, fewer leaps of faith, and more practical, business-oriented approaches to a pragmatic style of design that has measurable impact and measurable effect.
I think metrics is going to be the key word in the sense that now designers, and I think IDEO, I'm a big fan of IDEO because I think IDEO is a great organization that mixes business consulting, like the McKinseys and everything else, with design. And I think that, like until now, designers were just designers, consultants were just consultants. I think consulting is all about metrics. I think that from 24 to 36 months, I think to transform yourself to the next level, I think that the firms that will stay alive are the ones that can convince and show and guide the metrics. And if you want to do that, I think that there has to be a restraint on the business side and a restraint on the design side. So only the organizations, like you said, that we all talked about right now, that are able to communicate and prioritize as well, will be the ones who develop successful services, and develop successful practices.
So I'm not going to pontificate on the future. I don't know what the future will bring. But I do agree with some of the trends you guys are pointing towards. The experience economy, quote unquote, is probably going to hit a saturation point at some point. You can't always keep going up, and I'm not going to pay $8 for a coffee, no matter how great the experience is. So I do think some of this core functionality of, look, I just want a cup of coffee. I don't want to come in here with a barista shaking like her mambos at me, whatever the heck new wacky.
Where do you get the
I live in the Bay Area.
We're in
They all wear like fruit hats, So yeah, exactly. We're in Vegas. What are you talking about? Just a simple example. 5 years ago, I went to Prague. Delicious Czech beer, 75 cents. Nice 23-ouncer. I went back there, $5. How the heck in 5 years did the production of beer in Prague go up by that amount? Right? I mean, the experience theoretically was the same. I was in a nice Czech bar. I had a great tasty beer, but it cost me 5 times as much, if not more. And I'm seeing that happen everywhere, right? So if the economy is going to take some sort of dip, I think we will see people move to core functionality. Yeah. I just want it to work and get. And the other trend that's driving that, I think, is an oversaturation of information, of functionality, of options, of services, of devices, of stop bleeping. I go into my office at night, and then this anecdote. I go into my office at night, right? It's like midnight, so the lights are off, and there is 15 freaking lights blinking and beeping at me. Right? There's my phone connected to Bluetooth, my headset's over here, my computer's doing this, my wireless printer's doing that. It feels like I'm like the holodeck or something, right? And it's just that level of oversaturation of stuff and interconnectedness and everything. It probably will hit some level of saturation point, and we'll see a shift. So
great. So we have a mic up here in the front of the room. So if you have any questions, please come on up.
Going back to Jason's example on the experience of playing a DVD, some people are used to actually watch the trailers and the whole pattern.
Yeah.
And so if you remove the trailers, they might be upset. And actually, Disney came up with the idea of the fast play, right? But my question is, could you share any experiences, or your personal experiences of when to break a pattern or when to follow a pattern in user experience, and what factors determine that?
Right. So the example, put a fine point on that example, which is that not so much that the trailers were there, because that is an expected pattern, and it's something that people probably like, right? But it has more to do with the control and the fact that you couldn't skip the trailers, right? So I think that one of the things. So when you talk about patterns that people experience patterns, as you might call them, sort of expected experiences. I think one of the most important things to consider is control, and making the users not feel like they are the victim of some some nefarious business logic, right? That it's like, it's like Clockwork Orange. You're going to sit down and you're going to watch these trailers, and I'm going to make you watch these trailers, right? And so that sense of control and transparency is really, I think, what's important there.
The other example that comes to my mind is e-commerce. Like everybody's trying to follow Amazon and how you shop at Amazon. And actually, Jacob Nielsen was saying, don't follow Amazon anymore because they can take the risk of changing a few things and adding Flash and adding different ways of showing your catalog. So I guess I wonder when to follow that pattern, when to break it.
Well, okay, so shopping, and I know Luke has a lot of thoughts about this too. But there's shopping. Online shopping is a really salient example, right? We're in the middle of redesigning Dell right now, and trying to make that a better experience. So people in the real world shop in all sorts of ways, right? Like they shop emotionally, they shop socially, they do all. There's the shopping experience in the real world is this really rich, dynamic thing, and it's like I walk into a store and I'm like, oh, I see I have like a beautiful, I have talk about experience design, right? I walk into Abercrombie and Fitch, right? It's a very designed experience, and exactly, yeah. And that's how you walk when you go in there. So the clothing is laid out, and then that looks interesting. This shirt, I pick that up. I walk in the aisles. I find something else. I bring it to the dressing room. I try it on. I leave some stuff there. I go back out. Well, when you look at the patterns of online shopping, it's like, I search by category, and then I find this thing, and then I add it to my cart, and then I go check out, and it's not analogous necessarily to the way in which people shop in the real world. Now, that seems to me like a way, like I know the Patagonia website, right, shopping website. It's a fantastic shopping experience because they kind of change the navigation patterns and the ways in which sort of traditional shopping websites have been designed. And there's a, so I think that's one way to know when you break a pattern is when it's like the way in which something's been done before online or, using technology doesn't map to the way that people really experience stuff in the real world, right? So the trailer stuff, right? I could, if I'm annoyed with the trailers, I can walk out of the theater and go get popcorn, right?
One of the things that I try to say, and I'll keep this really short, is that the time to change something is before you notice it. Really, really hard to do. But the moment you notice something, other people are going to notice it too, and it starts becoming rote or just boring. So you try to make sure you're interrupting boring patterns before they become too boring. Disneyland is a great example of that, but it's very tough to do because it's a large infrastructure. That's one of the reasons why we've sort of gotten into moving around carts and where you sell products and food and stuff like that. Same thing with web design. Before you notice that there's a problem with the design, hopefully we've already started on a solution for it. Now, chances are we will not get that solution out until you've noticed it, but the more you can reduce the time before someone notices it and we can get it out.
Just a super fast point on the rote thing. Harvard Business Review did an analysis of how much better something has to be before people accept it over the thing that they're used to. And there's basically a 30% betterness factor. So once you get into a mode of doing something a certain way, so if you're going to try and replace scroll bars, unless that's 30% better or more efficient than scroll bars, guess what? Yeah. People want the damn scroll bars. Yeah. And when you actually do the empathetic IDEO model of watching people work, they will put up with a hell of a lot of crap because that's what they're used to.
It's amazing.
And they don't want to change that. This is how I file my taxes, and it takes them 10 hours to do. We could get you to do that in 8 hours. Not good enough, right? No. Get it down to 1, then we're talking.
Yeah, I mean we're trying to. I mean a perfect example of that is we're in the middle of redesigning the on-screen guides for Comcast, for example, right? So tens of millions of households and people, and adding more and more channels, but still you have this vertical grid of content, right, which is laid out in a particular way that mirrors the way that it was first printed in television in TV Guide. And is that the best way to find content in an on-demand and time-shifted world? Probably not exclusively. So that's but people put up with it because there's not something the sort of betterness factor of alternatives hasn't been sort of reached yet. Hopefully, when.
Hey, may I add some international flavor to that? This is a question to Luke, actually. You were talking about what's the next step. I mean, did you realize that I think we already have some signs. I mean, if you think about the search experience, people are not looking for a fancy or a typical fancy design interface or a good layout. I mean, it's all about if it works or not. And also, I have a funny story about, in Brazil, I mean, the most popular social network is called Orkut. And it's ugly like hell. It doesn't work. It's unstable, but somehow it's so popular. I mean, I think it's a challenge for us why some ugly things work, even if the experience is so bad, because I think it allows people to do things that other things don't allow them to do. Yeah. So it's all about, I would like to...
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Challenge. Yeah.
You're exactly right. It matters where on a product or technology life cycle you are. In the early stages, when there's an unmet need or people don't even know they have need, pure functionality rules. If something does something that you couldn't do before, you will put up with a lot of crap to be able to do that thing you weren't able to do before. As that becomes more and more commonplace, that functionality, and we're seeing this in social networking right now, it's moving up that curve, right? As there becomes more and more alternatives, then it becomes a little bit more of a feature battle, so to speak. And so you're seeing people move to places where they have better features. There is actually a general progression of people leveling off on MySpace, coming up on Facebook, and there were some rumors about a leveling off on Facebook. Once you kind of hit that stage, then people become in tune with what features there are, and you start to compete on a bit of a feature. At first, people don't know what the features are, so they just sort of go for the thing with the most features. Then after a while, they come a little bit smarter, look for particular features. Following that, you get into a stage where it's really about the experience, the overall cost of ownership of things, right? And I don't think we're there yet with social networking. I think we're getting there with things like search. And then after that, it's commoditization. So DVD player is a great example of that. It used to be you'd go to the store, you buy first it was a $3,000 DVD player, then it was a $300 DVD player, now it's like $50. And the DVD player has gotten commoditized to the point that it's in your car, it's in your computer, it's embedded in so many other devices that it's not really a standalone product or technology anymore. You're seeing that online as well, certain things like instant messaging is a perfect example. Tons of sites just have embedded instant messaging, right? It's just become commoditized and integrated into things. Social networking, over time, will probably also be commoditized and embedded into certain things. You're actually already seeing the beginnings of that, right? Like, oh yeah, we got a social networking feature, check. So yeah, it depends on where you are in the product lifecycle. When it's just about function, you can get away with looking like crap, acting like crap, and people will put up with it. But as more people come on, less of them will put up with it, and somebody else might come in and usurp your position through these added benefits.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks very much for attending.
Thank you.